Hello and welcome to Uncomfortable Conversations, where we focus on topics that are uncomfortable. First, we focus on the issue, then we get into the facts, and then we focus on the messaging. So let's talk about messaging. It can feel easier to try to shut down what can be uncomfortable than confront and discuss an issue. Women and people of color are very used to being told to correct language rather than receiving a response to our actual argument. Pushback usually comes in the form of saying the language is invalid because it doesn't align with the rules of a dominant group or is in what is deemed an unacceptable format or presentation and is a perceived overstepping of the cultural norm. Specific examples are when March for Our Lives called for an assault weapons ban, when Beto said he's coming to take away AR-15s, when Hillary Clinton called some Trump supporters deplorable, when Colin Kaepernick knelt during the anthem, when activists demanded to defund the police and abolish ICE, when border camps separating and holding families indefinitely were called concentration camps, when white supremacists began to be compared to Nazis, when healthcare for all started gaining popularity. You might remember some of the controversy surrounding these. People became uncomfortable and would say things like, you'd win a lot more seats and or people on your side if you didn't use insert slogan here. Don't be ashamed or avoid conversations that make you feel uncomfortable. People are social creatures. We connect through stories. Not talking about these issues to each other divides us more and allows propaganda to go around the world before the truth gets its boots on. If you don't like the language being used, don't use it. Whether it's detention camps or pro-abortion or defund the police or abolish ICE or love is love, you don't have to use it. You also do not get to control what somebody else uses if it resonates with them. Respond to the argument itself. Ask questions. It helps break down oppression and uplift the voice and message, as attacking a particular slogan or language used seems like the anger caused by the actual injustice and oppression are invalid. You don't get to control somebody else's chosen language or somebody else's story. You have the privilege of getting to let people know, here's what this means. Here's how this connects. Let's talk about systemic racism. Let's talk about infant maternal mortality and what abortion really means for women's health care. This is what's called pivoting. It lets you talk about what actually matters and the reality of the situation, not the propaganda language that is actually being directed at you. You might not have a personal story when it comes to police brutality, pregnancy loss and infant death, gun violence, or racism. In fact, I really hope you don't. Most likely, the intent is not inherently bad. The behavior is what needs to be adjusted by talking about content instead of delivery. Think of it this way. You get to control your messaging and how you connect to the people that you're talking to. Instead of saying, I wish people wouldn't use whatever as a slogan, I wish we wouldn't talk about whatever with this particular demographic. As an example, when Hillary called just half of Trump supporters deplorable because they amplified his violent and hateful rhetoric, there was an uproar.
Be grossly generalistic. You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. But that other basket of people are people who feel the government has let them down, the economy has let them down.
She apologized, and instead of being appeased, the opposition doubled down. An attempted insurrection, which included a noose, feces spread in the Capitol, plans to assassinate Congress, pipe bombs, several attempts to do the same at state level, literal attacks on those simply wearing masks to protect the people around them in the midst of a pandemic later. It seems like deplorable really was the mildest statement that could have been said. So instead of covering our tracks, stepping around on eggshells and tripping over ourselves to distance the language, we need to lean in. Yes, I did call a subset of Trump supporters deplorable. Between the your feeling shirts, calls for violence, and Nazi and Confederate flags I have seen and continue to see, I stand by that statement. I am very concerned for my supporters who are terrified of what a Trump administration would bring. They leaned in to being called deplorable as a badge of honor. It's time we stop being concerned at what they think of the language that we use. An example of leaning in and standing by speaking out is Beto.
You said, quote, Americans who own AR-15s and AK-47s will have to sell them to the government, all of them. You know the critics call this confiscation. Are you proposing taking away their guns, and how would this work?
I am, if it's a weapon that was designed to kill people on a battlefield. If the high impact, high velocity round, when it hits your body, shreds everything inside of your body because it was designed to do that so that you would bleed to death on a battlefield and not be able to get up and kill one of our soldiers. When we see that being used against children, and in Odessa, I met the mother of a 15-year-old girl who was shot by an AR-15, and that mother watched her bleed to death over the course of an hour because so many other people were shot by that AR-15 in Odessa and Midland. There weren't enough ambulances to get to them in time. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
Congressman, thank you.
And I want to say this. I'm listening to the people of this country. The day after I proposed doing that, I went to a gun show in Conway, Arkansas, to meet with those who are selling AR-15s and AK-47s and those who are buying those weapons. And you might be surprised, there was some common ground there. Folks who said, I would willingly give that up, cut it to pieces. I don't need this weapon to hunt, to defend myself. It is a weapon of war. So let's do the right thing, but let's bring everyone in America into the conversation, Republicans, Democrats, gun owners, and non-gun owners alike.
In summary, even if you don't agree with the language being used, don't undermine it. Don't attack a slogan. Don't belittle those using it. Think of how meaningless it is for advocates against gun violence prevention when they focus on the use of the term assault rifles rather than the very real issue of daily mass shootings and millions, if not billions of dollars spent on medical costs due to guns in this country. When you actually go to the beginning and discuss the root cause, people have more in common than they realize. So instead of deflecting the issue towards the delivery, address the actual problem with the conversation. A statement that leads into a conversation rather than acting as a soundbite isn't a bad thing. Refusing to acknowledge the conversation as the part that's actually important leads to mistrust and division.